There's been so much talk going on about this car ever since BMW unveiled it that it was about time that I did a review on it. Yes, this is the brand new BMW 1 Series, and boy oh boy did people go off on it from day one. That's because from some angles, especially in pictures, this does look like a Kia. But that's not a bad thing if you ask me, because Kia did grow a lot in the past, let's say, 20 years. And it did so by borrowing some of the best minds BMW ever employed. And I'm, of course, talking about Albert Biermann, the man behind so many legendary M models. So Kia was able to develop a lot of great driving cars. And then they hired some new designers, and of course Kia became a somewhat Asian BMW, if you will, taking that title from Mazda, which recently has gone into a cone of shadow. So if I were in BMW's shoes, I wouldn't take that as an offense. However, die-hard BMW fans who probably won't even buy this car or won't even considering buying a 1 Series, especially a front-wheel drive 1 Series, they have gone up in flames online talking about what they would have done different. Well, today we're gonna dissect this new car, and I have to say from the get-go, if you paid close attention to the presentation BMW did on the 1 Series, you probably might have noticed that this is more than just a facelift. If you ask me, this is a completely new platform, this is a completely new car, a completely new model. That's probably why the code name for this car changed from F40 to F70, because the changes are so big. And they go a lot deeper than the shape of the headlamps or the shape of the car, if you will. But we're going to talk about all of those today in this review. So let's start with the design, right? So what changed? It's rather obvious. The front and the rear end changed quite a lot. So the headlamps are a bit more rounded off, and they have different signature lights inside them. BMW says they should resemble some arrows. I'm not totally seeing the arrows over here. I do see the blue patterns inside, which used to be reserved for laser headlights, but these are only LEDs. So yeah, I don't really see those arrows, but I do see the lack of Corona rings, which has been a traditional BMW design cue for a very long time, and I am going to miss them, and I really don't see why BMW is deciding to drop some of its most iconic design features in recent years. Now, the kidney grills, of course, they are also an iconic element on most modern BMWs. So if you change the headlamps and you change the kidney grills, of course people are going to say your car looks like a Kia. Now on this car, because this is an M performance model, this is an M135, I'm going to talk about that later on, we have everything blacked out over here, and we have a specific design for the kidney grille. Now that doesn't come as standard, mind you, even though this is an M performance car. That's an optional feature included in the M Sport Pro package, because M Sport wasn't enough. We now have M Sport Pro, and on the M performance model we also have the M Technology Pack, which adds even more stuff to the car. So the M Technology Pack basically means that you can actually take this car to the track. It brings different brakes up front with a different compound for the rotors. It brings a stiffer set of bushings, stiffer set of anti-roll bars, and the stiffer setup in the backs as well, on top of the fact that you get semi-slick tires. So quite a heavy upgrade for those who are looking to track the M135, even though this is a front-wheel drive car at its core. Yes, it has X-Drive, it's all-wheel drive, but the platform itself is a front-wheel drive platform. So I'm curious to see how many people will buy that package. Of course, it's not a bad thing that it is being offered, but I am really curious about who's going to buy it. The M Sport Pro package also includes these red brake calipers with 4 pistons in the front and 2 pistons in the back. Now, that said, that's what changed up front. Of course, the bumper has a slightly different shape, and the air curtains to the sides are actually real. They are used to help cool off the brakes. On other cars, not the M35i, the M135, I beg your pardon, those are fake. Now, why did I make that mistake? Because starting with the 1 Series, this facelifted 1 Series, BMW is once again changing something that has been very, very traditional to the regular BMW customer. So the cars running on petrol will no longer use the I suffix. That will be used for electric cars alone. So if you're gonna see one of these cars on the road and you're gonna notice the badge at the back saying M135, that's because, not because it lost an I, just because it doesn't exist anymore. However, on the diesel side of things, the D stays. Also, on plug-in hybrids, the E stays. Why? I don't really know. It seems like most manufacturers, not just BMW, are trying to confuse us so much these days by changing things that were so simple to understand and were set in stone over the period of 20, 30 years. Everything's becoming very, very confusing. So yeah, starting from this year, every single car launched by BMW moving forward will no longer have the I suffix. The I will be used for electric cars alone. So in the BMW 1 Series range, for example, we now have the 118D, the 120D, the 120 and the M135. That's it. Now, of course, we have some new wheels for the cars. Of course, new wheel choices. This one has the 19-inch wheels and performance model. 19 inches are the 19-inch wheel is the biggest you can get. The range starts at 17 inches. Of course, we have the one here in the C-pillar in the Hofmeister King that was also changed. And for the first time ever on the 1 Series, on a BMW, you can get a contrasting roof. Now, around the back, we have new taillights and something that I actually like on the new 1 Series, the fact that we have quad tailpipes, real tailpipes on this car, and they do give it a very, very mean demeanor. Are they overkill? Do they sound good? Well, we're gonna see when we drive the car. Also, since BMW started actually changing the M performance models to make them closer to the real deal M cars, we also have M style side mirrors. So we have like a missing arm over here, also done in black, part of the M Sport Pro package. So let's talk engines, right? As I already mentioned, there are some mild hybrid versions and there are purely internal combustion versions available. No plug-in hybrids, no electric choices for the moment. Just right now, you only have 4 models to choose from. We will see a number of other different variants introduced later as the car arrives in certain dealerships around the world. So on the diesel side of things, you have the 118D and the 120D, and on the petrol side of things, you have the 120 and the M135 xDrive. On the diesel side of things, it's quite interesting. We have the same engine used. It's a 2-liter, 4-cylinder, 150 horsepower diesel. But on the 120D, opposed to the 118D, you have a electric motor included in between the gearbox and the engine, so that makes it a mild hybrid, a 48-volt system. So it has more power as well, 163 horsepower for the 120D. The same doesn't go for the petrol side of things. Quite interestingly, the 120 has a 1.5-liter 3-cylinder engine under the hood. The same I tested on the BMW X2 earlier this year, and it's a mild hybrid, whereas the M135, the one we're driving, is not a mild hybrid, uses a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that now makes 300 horsepower and 400 Newton meters of torque. Quite importantly, I would also add, is the fact that all the gearboxes are now automatics, and every single car you're gonna get uses a 7-speed dual clutch gearbox, as opposed to the previous generation, which had an 8-speed ASIN on certain models. So that changed on the M135 as well. So we no longer have the 8-speed ASIN model torque converter gearbox, we have a 7-speed dual clutch now. And since that's the case, the torque has been reduced on this new model as well. So whereas the old model had 306 horsepower and 450 newton meters of torque, the new one has 300 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque. But if you look at the performance of the two cars, the new one is only 0.1 seconds slower than the old one. Some would say that's not an evolution, but I don't think most people will feel the difference. But let's see how this car drives when you actually push it to the limit, because it has all these M badges on it, right? Let's switch to sport mode. And well, it definitely picks up speed. It's not a slow car by any means. Let's see how other things. I like the fact that the gearbox is right up there with you. Let's see how it handles some corners. Okay, you can actually throw it in a corner. Well, it's very well planted. That has a lot to do with the suspension. I like the brake feel. It allows you to modulate it really well. You can actually jump on it really hard. And I like the way it feels. It's inspiring a lot of confidence. I like the fact that the car keeps its weight in check really nicely. It's also quite light, especially compared to today's BMW standards, where the M5 is 2.5 tons. So this tips the scales at about 1.5. So yeah, it's pretty light. And you do have 300 horsepower. Okay, a bit too much speed here. What I do like about this car is that it doesn't understeer. So it's a front-wheel drive platform underneath it all, but the M135 is all-wheel drive, and it doesn't really understeer. I felt it just a tiny bit on exit right there. Exit in the corner, but yeah, it's a really fun car to drive. It's been a while since I've driven a hot hatch. I guess you can tell, but I really like the way the gearbox stays right up there with you. It was set up really nicely. So yeah, overall I would say this car is neutral. It does understeer, but you have to really push it to feel that understeer in the steering wheel. It's really nice to drive, not a lot to complain about. Woo! In sport mode, these shifts are actually, you can actually feel them, as opposed to the previous generation torque converter, in which, yeah, the shifts were a lot smoother, so the car didn't really feel that composed. I do have the traction control partially turned off, but it doesn't really show. I can hear the car's computers working extra hard to keep me safe. There's a ticking noise coming from under the dashboard, and I think that's from the ARB system, which is a new generation traction control system, which supposedly reacts a lot faster than the old DSC. It was first introduced on electric cars because of their instant torque. Yeah, I like it. Even though there have been some changes done to it, I don't think a lot of people will actually notice them. It doesn't feel slower than the old generation, but it does feel a lot less, how should I put it? It does make you feel a lot more disconnected. Let's switch back to normal mode, personal mode. So even though it's quite precise and agile, this car doesn't really give you a lot of feedback, and I think the steering has a lot to do with that. There's no feel. It's completely numb. There's no feel in the steering wheel, and I think that really takes away from the driving pleasure a car with so many badges, M badges on it, should have. That's the first thing I noticed. You feel completely disconnected from what's happening under you. But if we're taking out the M135i from the range, I'm guessing that most customers, most BMW 1 Series customers will actually want that disconnect, will want to be completely separated from the bumps in the road. That's a pro in many people's books because it makes the suspension a lot better than the previous generation. And now let's talk about the suspension setup. Now we have a McPherson setup up front, but in the back, we no longer have a multi-link setup. It's still an independent setup, but it's a 3 control arm setup. It's quite different than on the previous generation. So I don't really feel a lot of the comfort going away, and I don't feel it a bit more twitchy in the bends. So I'm guessing this was definitely a coast-cutting measure, but I don't think it has a huge impact on the overall feel of the car. Now you can get adaptive dampers on these cars. All cars will now get frequency adaptive dampers on the front axle, which are those dampers introduced on the 3 Series at first. They react depending on how fast the bound and rebound are separated. So if the car feels, if the damper feels like it's working extra hard, it guesses that you're driving in a faster fashion, and it automatically stiffens up. That's what it does. That's why it's frequency controlled. But then you can also get classic, if you will, electronically controlled dampers on these cars, like the ones we have on this M135, which gets them as standard. So it's the classical system where it adapts depending on the driving mode you're in. And I have to say, in sport mode, this car is very composed. It's quite interesting that this M135 comes with Goodyear Eagle F1 tires. Normally medium to high performance BMW cars come with Michelin tires, but this time I'm seeing Goodyear on this car. Maybe if you go for the M technology package I was talking about earlier, you can get semi-slicks, and I'm guessing those are Michelin, but I'm not sure, so we're gonna have to wait and see. I love the seats. They are incredibly comfortable and they look absolutely brilliant, and I love this M logo we have on the seat. I don't know if you can see it. It's lit up at night and it looks absolutely brilliant. The seats look brilliant and they offer a lot of side support, and they are comfortable despite of what you may think. I like the steering wheel, even though it's getting a bit too thick for my liking these days, and I like this red ring at the 12 o'clock dead center point to keep you in check whenever you're driving, in case you forget just what position your wheels have. And I also like these paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. They may be made of plastic, but they feel really nice to the touch. What's interesting is that on the left paddle shifter, the one for going a gear down, you have an inscription that says boost. Let me show you what it does. If you hold the pedal down, the car automatically downshifts to the lowest point to give you the most power whenever you need it, and it's quite nice. And I actually like the way this gearbox responds to your input. It's quite fast. I like it. Some people might consider it a downgrade, and I'm sure this choice of going with a 7-speed dual clutch instead of an 8-speed torque converter from ASIN was done to cut some costs, maybe on the production line, maybe in the overall grand scheme of things, but this gearbox just works. I mean, there's really little to complain about. I use this car around town, no niggles whatsoever. So normally dual clutch gearboxes sometimes have some hesitation around town, but not this one, and it performed actually pretty well. Let's talk about fuel consumption for a bit. So around town I saw an average of about 13 liters per 100 kilometers covered. Not bad at all, considering the traffic I was in. On the highway, that figure dropped to 8.3, and on B roads such as this, if you stick to the speed limit, not drive like a maniac like I just did, that fuel consumption went down to 5.8. So pretty impressive. I remember I drove the Honda Civic Type R not too long ago with a 2-liter 330 horsepower engine under the hood, and that around town took at least 20 liters per 100 kilometers covered. So this feels like a very, very different experience in terms of fuel economy. Mind you, if you're buying this car, you're not going to be worried about how much money you're going to spend at the petrol pump. You will be worried about range, so the car has a fuel tank of 49 liters. Now, other changes done to the new 1 Series include everything you see in here. So the dashboard was completely changed. We have new screens. Everything is just like you would see on other cars using this platform. I am of course referring to the BMW X1, to the BMW X2, the mini models, but they don't have the same interior design, but the same technical underpinnings. So we have the operating system 9 over here, which includes some shortcuts in the bottom of the screen, and of course the digital premium subscription package. Now that's an option. If you're gonna take it, it allows you to access the shop, the BMW connected shop, where you can buy streaming apps. You can also, if you buy the digital premium package, you get internet included with the 4G, the 5G eSIM on board this car. So there are a number of things you might want to take into consideration before buying the digital premium package. And of course, the digital premium option allows you to buy those famous or infamous subscriptions BMW has been talking about. The ones everybody talked about were the heated seats. Let's talk about that for a second. So what's the idea behind all this madness, as some people put it? Well, basically BMW allows you to buy certain features on a car after the car was configured and bought. So my guess is almost all 1 Series models will have heated seats. The hardware will be there. However, some of them will not be activated, some will be. Let's say somebody buys this car in the south of Spain or the south of France. And when they configure it, they don't really need heated seats because it's not that cold over there. So they don't take this option. They use it for a year or two and then they sell it on the second-hand market. Now, if you want to buy it and you live, let's say, in Great Britain, I don't think that's feasible because of the way people drive over there, the wrong steering wheel. Let's say you want to drive it in Germany. Let's say you live in Germany, or let's say you live in Poland, and let's say you live in Lithuania. Places where winters are a bit harsher and the temperatures do go down a bit more. So you want to buy this car from the first owner in the south of Spain. And you actually want those heated seats. All you have to do is go into the store, the BMW Connected store, and you can actually buy this option as a one-time fee, so you can have the heated seats even during summertime, or you can access a subscription only for the colder weather, the colder months, let's say November, December, January, February, okay? I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. As long as BMW manages to cut some costs and I can have everything I want on the car. The same goes for adaptive LEDs. I'm guessing a lot of the new 1 Series will have the tech embedded in the headlamp, but not activated unless you want to pay for it. So you can activate it or not. Let's say you only drive around town, you don't need those lights, you don't pay for them. Let's say the car changes hands, the new owner does cover a lot of miles outside the city at night, and it needs the most advanced LED lamps. You can just activate them. So I don't think it's as stupid as some people made them seem, and as long as it's not an mandatory thing, so you can choose whether you want it or not, I think it's a good thing overall. This 1 Series, compared to the previous generation, did grow up a lot. You have a lot of new tech. I'm going to show you a new one, the assisted driving, the driving assistant, if you will. Now, it works almost the same as on the 7 Series and the 5 Series. What I mean by that is you have a huge radar up integrated into the kidney grills. It can sense objects at up to 200 meters in front of you. Then you have cameras all around that can sense objects in the medium distance range. And then you have the car's parking sensors for close quarters. The 1 Series can be fitted with the most advanced driving systems BMW has to offer. So when you activate it, the car can actually change lanes for you. And it can do so if you simply look in the left mirror or on the right mirror. It doesn't work over here in Romania, but I heard it works in other countries. But even though this gaze-controlled lane turning doesn't work in Romania, the car can still change lanes for you. So if you're activating the driving assistant, and you make sure there's no cars, let's say on the left lane, right? If you turn on the left turn signal, the car will change lanes for you. The same goes for the right lane. So if you're too lazy to do this, I guess it can come in handy. Of course, it's not a bad thing that this technology exists, but I just don't see why, if I made sure there's nobody on the oncoming lane, if I'm signaling, why can't I just do the maneuver myself, right? So yeah, it does assist you, but up to a certain point. Furthermore, you also have a lot of functionality embedded in the My BMW app. You can remotely control the park using the app. You can pull it out of a tight parking space. I've seen that work. The only thing is, those features only work on mild hybrid models. I don't know exactly why. It's not like the car only uses that electric motor in between the gearbox and the internal combustion engine to power the car whenever these maneuvers are done. Because I've seen it done and it uses the internal combustion engine. I'm guessing it's because, I don't know why. So at first it will only be available on the 120i and the 120D and the 120. And that's it. This car, for example, doesn't have it. So what's the takeaway regarding this new F71 series? Well, it did grow up a lot. It has a lot of new tech, and you could probably call it a miniaturized 7 Series because of all the tech it has on board. The 135 definitely drives brilliantly. It's a pretty good front-wheel drive hot hatch. Its rivals, well, the traditional Audi A3 and Mercedes-Benz A-Class. If we're talking about the M35i, well, the rivals would be the A35 from Mercedes-Benz and the Audi S3. My question to you guys is, which one would you get? Oh, and before I forget, pricing for these cars, well, it depends on the market. Over here, it starts at 36,000 euros. The car we're driving, the M135i, starts at 53,000. This car we're driving, this particular model, has a price tag of 66,000 euros. So quite expensive. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Until next time, don't forget to feed your passions.